Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in my weekly nonprofit podcast, People in Fundraising. I am really excited to welcome Kel Haney to our podcast today. Kel, you're someone I follow and admire for all your content on LinkedIn, so it's a real treat for me to have you here today.
Oh, thanks so much, Tim. I so appreciate that. Like when we post things on LinkedIn, it kind of feels like we're going out into the vast universe. And my good friend Tanya Bhattacharya always says that there's a bunch of quote unquote lurkers. So you just never know what's reaching whom and when and how and why. So it was really great to have you reach out, and I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you. And if you could please tell our audience a little bit about you
Mhm.
professionally, where they can find your services and where you are on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. So I'm Kel Haney, and I am the founder and CEO of Kel Haney Consulting. And what my firm does is we guide not-for-profits on how to build and maintain mid-level donor relationships, predominantly through 5-minute phone calls. I have a framework of the 5-minute fundraising ask. So I think you can throw away your scripts. I think scripts are for actors. I don't think they're for fundraisers. Teach you how to have a more holistic conversation that can be both stewardship and solicitation on the same call. So train organizations on how to do that. I have a group intensive. You can work with me one-on-one. And the bulk of our work is actually in outbound fundraising. So setting up outbound fundraising campaigns. So I look at this as a bit of like disruptor in the sector in some ways of as opposed to working with a telemarketing firm, you work with us and we're a consulting firm, and an organization can hire artists, predominantly artists, sometimes it's not artists, to actually make the phone calls. And we go ahead and we do all of the back end of training and coaching and maintaining that work. So it's a little bit of a different way of working, and it's been
Yeah,
working really well for us. We can talk about it more if you want.
yeah, absolutely.
And you can find me on LinkedIn, as Tim said. I'm very active on LinkedIn and try to post a lot of content there. Also, find me. My website is kelhaney.com. I've got some fun free resources there, 8 phrases not to use in fundraising, and 5 tips for building your mid level donor base. I also have a weekly newsletter that you can hop on that too, where I share a lot of info.
Wonderful. You put out so much content, Cal. That's dynamite.
It's my pleasure. Happy to do it.
And yes, I would love to follow up with you later in the questionnaires about the outbound fundraising campaign
Sure.
we talked
Yep.
about. So thank you for mentioning that as well.
Absolutely.
As I do for every guest, Cal, we first start with how you entered the fundraising profession. So if you want to take a few minutes, tell us about that journey, please.
We all have interesting journeys, right, Tim? And how we got into fundraising, how we quote unquote, most of us fell into fundraising. My friend Cindy Wagman is like the only person I know who like went to school and like knew she wanted to be a fundraiser. And go figure, she's not even in fundraising. She now does fractional fundraising and is like running that world in a way. But okay, so for me, I was a theater director. I went to school and have a degree in English and a degree in theater. And 2 weeks after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City for what was supposed to be a 3-month long internship at Manhattan Theater Club, which is one of the largest not-for-profit theaters in the country, and same thing in New York City. And that summer, I spent a rainy Saturday reading all 7 plays that were happening at the theater that year. And I read this one play and it knocked my socks off. My roommate came home and I said, I know I literally just moved to New York, but this play should win the Pulitzer. It should move to Broadway. It should win the Tony. I can't imagine leaving New York with this play happening. So I
Mm.
got a job as the second assistant to the artistic director of Manhattan Theater Club. So it was a kinder, gentler version of The Devil Wears Prada, but I was like the smallest fish in the largest pond. And I got to, for people who know theater, I got to quote unquote be on book. I got to be in rehearsals and tech rehearsals for that show, got to know the actors and the playwright. and subsequently ended up working for the director as his associate. So
Wow.
that play actually did win the Pulitzer,
You
and
were
it
right.
did move to Broadway and win the Tony. And it was a play called Doubt by John Patrick Shanley.
Yeah.
And they made, you know that. Yeah, you know
Yes.
it. And so, yeah, they made it into a movie with the late, great Philip Seymour Hoffman and Viola Davis and Meryl Streep and Amy Adams a few years later. Yeah, so it was really formative to me. But it won't come as a surprise to anyone listening, but theater directors, particularly, newer and less experienced ones, don't make any money. So I need to do
Right.
something to make money. So I started fundraising over the phone for Manhattan Theater Club at night. And so I was in their call room, quote unquote, and there were some kind of old school coffeeists for closers, kind of boiler room things that are not how I run my company now. But it
Mm,
was really informative for me about what was positive about that experience and what was less than positive for me to figure out how to move forward.
sure.
But short of it is, I didn't have a background in sales and I didn't have a background in fundraising, but I was talking every day to people about my favorite thing. And I was
Yeah.
encouraging them to come see Doubt. And if they'd seen Doubt, encouraging them to come see more work at Manhattan Theater Club. And I subsequently raised approximately $6 million dollars in less than 8 years over the phone,
Wow.
mostly in contributed revenue, but also in earned revenue. Again, I think, the beauty of these organizations that are theaters and ballets, performing arts, museums, botanical gardens, parks. Like when there's an experiential component, you can have both earned and contributed revenue, and those can work together like peanut butter and jelly
Yeah.
when it comes to community building. So that's how I got in. I
Wow.
thought it went from being a survival job, quote unquote, to it became a parallel career as I was
Mm.
continuing to develop my directing career. I thought it was going to be like the magic line on my resume that got me hired as an artistic director. And I did almost get hired in the fall of 2019 to go to Alaska, of all places. And my
Oh,
husband's an actor. And so we had to have some really big life conversations of, are we moving to Alaska for my work? Luckily for everybody, they ended up hiring their interim artistic director. So I did not end up going to
oh,
Alaska right before the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit and theater closed,
mm,
a lot of my colleagues really got into doing virtual work, and I did a little bit of that, but it wasn't really enticing me. And so I started working on more fundraising campaigns, and I slowly realized that I was happier not doing my favorite thing. As crazy as that
interesting.
sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just felt burned out, and I got to watch spring unfold in New York City for the first time
Wow.
ever in the 16 years I've lived there. And I got
Yeah.
to have dinner with my husband every night, and I was like, I just started to realize that I'd been crafting my life to support my career
Mm,
instead of my career to support my life.
yeah.
And at almost 40 years old, I was ready for a change. And I started to feel excited about making the pie bigger for everybody as opposed to just fighting for like a bite of this little crummy, maybe stale piece. Like it felt really good making it bigger. So that's how I got here. So it all of my work is really reverse engineered back to how I was so successful and what made me successful when I was on the phones fundraising, and how do I train and coach other people to bring their superpowers and their passion to these conversations.
What a journey, Cal. That
Yeah.
is amazing.
Thank
And
you.
I just have to go back for a moment. Like your predictive expertise to see the incredible potential of doubt is amazing.
I mean,
You
yeah,
called it. You
I
ran the
did call.
table.
Yeah. Me and Paige Evans. Yeah, it was really Paige Evans, who was at Manhattan Theater Club, then became the artistic director of Signature Theater, who's also one of our clients.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I wasn't the only one, but yeah, I saw it, I felt it, and I was right. So you don't know, Tim. I think there's a very good possibility part of my third act might be as a commercial producer. So we'll see where life brings me.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also struck, Kel. Is there a moment when you were making calls for the Manhattan Theater Company where
Mhm.
you can now look like an epiphany in hindsight and look back and say, I've been doing this work to support my life,
Yeah.
and I'm doing this work with calling donors to support the theater club.
Hmm.
I want to take that skill and my love for arts, but the things I'm learning in this role as well, and use it in the nonprofit sector. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was, I mean, that was a really slow journey, actually.
Okay.
That was a slow journey over 15 years, frankly, because it
Okay.
was from me spending almost 8 years on the phones myself to then deciding I wanted to take a break. And again, theater industry is really small, so there were a lot of people who had worked at Manhattan Theater Club who knew what I was capable of. So then they had worked there, and then they started working at other not-for-profits. So
Okay.
my colleague Jeremy Blocker was at New York Theater Workshop, and I came in for 3 months to help them when they were in an interim situation with their call room. I learned a lot there. And then my colleague Blake West, who was in special events at Manhattan Theater Club, he actually ended up being the executive director of MCC Theater. Gets a
Okay.
little confusing, MCC versus MTC, but he works for MCC Theater. So he asked me almost 11 years to come in and spend 3 months setting up a call room for his
Wow.
company.
Yeah.
That has now been almost 11 years, and we are still collaborators.
Awesome.
And the four outbound fundraisers, who are all artists, they raise over half of the individual giving budget every year over the phone.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
and a large portion of the subscriptions that come in as well. And
Okay.
last season, we actually sold out subscriptions.
Wonderful.
So don't get me wrong, they had Neil Patrick Harris and Jane Krakowski in a show, so that certainly helped. But we were excited we were able to do that. So it was a slow journey of really figuring out, I don't know, it really felt like it really went from being this thing that I did on the side that supported my career. And I think that just slowly started to change. But again, I thought it was all towards the larger objective of becoming an artistic director. And I always said in the back of my mind, okay, I'll go be an artistic director. And if that isn't fulfilling to me, if that doesn't feel in alignment, maybe someday I'll be a consultant. I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, I'll do that someday. But I don't know about you, but I think that for a lot of us, I mean, I frankly had a lot of privilege during the pandemic to be able to work from home, safely work from
Yes.
home, and be able to figure out what my next path was on my career. I think it just accelerated what was going to happen for me in a
Yes.
larger sense. So, yeah, it's just been, I didn't see the second act coming. I do think someday I will have a podcast about second acts potentially.
Wonderful.
But it was slow. But I think to your question about the mid-level though, I think it took me a while to figure out just how to market and how to have conversations about. I knew I could do this really well. I knew I could train other people to have these phone conversations. And so I was like, "Oh, I can teach you how to fundraise over the phone."
Yeah.
But when my business really started to take a turn and started to really gain momentum was when, to your point, I really pinpointed it for mid-level. So
Yeah.
part of that was just part and parcel of when you've got an experiential component, like with theaters, a lot of theaters have a quote unquote patrons program. So then there's
Mm.
particular benefits for a mid-level donor. And so it
Yeah.
is this kind of different area where grassroots, it's not about benefits, major gifts, not really about benefits, but sometimes that happens in the mid-level. And I actually think it's healthy, particularly when there's an experiential component to the org and you want people in your doors, period. It
Right.
really is like this does both things. So there was a moment that I truly remember walking into my bedroom and saying to my husband, like, I figured it out. I'm going to market this specifically towards mid-level
Mm.
because mid-level needs something different. Most
Yeah.
organizations understand or think they understand major gifts and the idea that that is a long-term commitment in terms of
Definitely.
building out that relationship and that that needs to feel really collaborative and that that takes time.
Yes.
So organizations are willing to commit and have people who are specifically cultivating major gifts relationships.
Yeah.
And then we've got grassroots and monthly donors, and automation is so strong, and email support is so strong. And there's so many ways that we can really curate and segment and really make a really specific relationship for grassroots. But
Yes.
mid-level needs something different. Most
Yeah.
people are not committing to 1,000. And when I say mid-level, I think that depends. My friend Brooke Ritchie Babbage has like a really great algorithm that I won't go into, or like a mathematical problem, I should say,
Okay.
about how to do that. But I mean, for most orgs, it's 1,000 to write under 10,000. Smaller
Yeah.
organizations, maybe it starts at 750 or even 500 for mid levels. So there's
Yeah.
a little bit of a like that scale can move, but it tends to be a 4-digit gift and they need something else. So,
Yeah.
it's like it's not appropriate, slash, your organization can't sustain like taking all of those people out for lunch once or twice a year.
Right.
But also, they're not necessarily converting from 100, $250 to over 1,000 because of a great email you sent. So
Right.
that's where the 5-minute phone call comes into play, is to be
Awesome.
able to, in that 5 minutes, be able to build relationship, add qualitative data to the CRM, also have a moment to like CRM cleanup, not the like juiciest thing, exciting thing, but for us in the know, we know it actually is. Make sure we have the correct information for folks,
Yes.
and also make a soft ask and see if this is a moment that they're feeling in alignment to get involved on the mid level.
Wow. Wow. Then that touches back to some of your introductory remarks, Cal, where you mentioned just again now the 5-minute phone call.
Hmm.
Um, and you also mentioned like group training, individual training. So what typically is the format that you're coaching clients on? Is it Zoom? Is it in person? Is it a mix? Is it literally over the phone to do the 5-minute phone call?
Not over the phone. Good question. Most of it is over Zoom. I am in person if that's something that a client is particularly interested in. So
Yeah.
it takes about, I'd say about 2 hours just to really go over the fundamentals of the 5-minute fundraising ask.
Uh,
And then it takes another 2 to 4 hours in terms of, really talking through like specifics. And I've got like a bunch of quick tips that I like to pass out immediately.
uh-huh.
I also do something fun now. It's almost like 5-minute fundraising Mad Libs, where I have a worksheet so people can really, because I mean, sometimes I'm in speaking engagements and they like want 45 minutes. And I say, okay, 45 minutes, let's go. I'm going to get you at the end of 45 minutes to be able to get on the phone. So I do have it. I have different formats depending on the circumstances,
Okay.
which is great. And also, it's really important that I'm there as a consultant and I'm there as a strategic partner. So
Yeah.
after we go through the original training, my work really does focus more on being a coach and also a
Mhm.
strategic partner. So I like to just remind everybody that even Olympians have coaches. Everybody who's at the top of their game has a coach. So to really explain that, like, I'm there because there's always more to learn and different times of year, different things are happening depending on the year. There's so many variables,
That's true.
and I'm really there to help navigate and figure out who we should be calling, what messaging we should be using, and also setting goals. I can't tell you how
Yeah.
many people I work with that don't have specific goals, or
Really?
yeah, even year-end goals. Yeah, that it's like, oh yeah, we think, or maybe overall it's this. And I'm like, no, it's all about get it done dopamine for both the fundraiser and the person we're calling, and sharing specific numerical amounts over the phone. But we need to have them set for ourselves in order to be able to share that with our community members.
Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Yeah. And I've spent my entire career in institutional fundraising,
Okay.
just in
Yeah.
research. And so,
Yes.
looking at portfolios, prospect
Yep.
management, it's like there's always a gift
Hmm.
pyramid floating around, or,
Yeah.
there are a lot of KPIs and goals that are very well articulated. So to
Yeah.
hear that that's not the case, even
Not always the
today.
case. I
Yeah.
think even within individual giving, it's not always the case, or it's not really segmented totally by donor level or by portfolio for the individual fundraiser.
Yeah.
And I think that like can feel a little scary to people, and it can feel like, oh, I feel like I'm being monitored or something. And it's like, well, no, it is truly like, let's gamify this for ourselves. And
Right.
also, if we understand our goals, we can also manage up in moments when it's not reasonable. So,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about a client this year that we've worked with for a long time. And, it's obviously all of the orgs. Every year we need more money. Cost of living goes up for all of us. But to
Yeah.
just see like, a blanket 10 or 15% increase. And what I watched was actually making the month to month goal 10 or 15% higher. And I said, well, no, we should look at not just last year, but let's look at the last 3 years
Yeah.
to really determine I'm all about a goal. So I'm like, let's figure it out. 10, 15% more, let's go. But it needs a more in-depth examination than just blanketly, let's add that amount to each month. I really want to look at the patterns of what was happening in the
Yeah.
org year to year. And I don't think going back any further than 2022 is helpful.
Mm.
But I really have said, like, let's look back at what you raised. For instance, we're recording this in December of 22, 23, and 24, not
Yeah.
just looking back to 24 and figuring out what has been shifting in the org that
Yes.
might be like, be what's direct. And as we all know, I also want to like look specifically at mid-level as much as possible because so frequently adding or subtracting a 6, 7 figure major gift drastically changes that number. And so I want to get those out so we can really look at what's specifically mid-level.
Yes. Yeah. My last two shops have used that 3-year trend as well. So
Great.
spot
Good.
on there. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll also say it's a little different when you're on the phones, just as like we're like talking about data for a second.
Yeah.
So I actually really recommend that the fundraiser be looking at two different numbers. So obviously we've got the number that's in the CRM, the number that we're sharing with finance and auditors that's like, here's the money that's actually in the door. But
Yes.
this time of year in particular, I really recommend that you've got a soft number that includes all of your pledges because momentum creates more momentum. And so I'm not so worried of unless an org, well, I guess if you've got a 12/31 end of fiscal, maybe you are really concerned that every single pledge comes in. But again, I'm a little fast and loose with this. So I'm like, I would rather you be on the phones bringing in more pledges and be like, okay, and then we're going to chase them down in January as is
Yes.
necessary. I would rather watch us. I would say it's no more than like 5% of unfulfilled pledges for most of our clients. So I would much rather watch you exceed your goal by 10 or 20%. And then you've made that even without those pledges that haven't come in. And then
Oh,
you can
yeah.
spend your time in January chasing down those pledges and
Right.
spend your time in January making those thank you calls. But in
Yeah.
December, and if somebody's got a different end of fiscal, also that month, I want to see them just staying on the phones as much as possible.
Totally. How do clients generally respond to that encouragement, that advice?
They tend to take it pretty well. I mean, it's interesting because it's usually the individuals that I'm working with are excited and a little bit more fly by the seat of their pants, a little bit more disruptors. I do have a group program running right now, and one of the participants in the group understands that methodology and is really game for it, and the
Nice.
rest of the org isn't, which is fine. So she's got her own little post-it where she's got or whatever her note on her computer, and so
Yeah.
that's and they know it's not a secret, but they know that she's sharing the number that is the pledged amount, not what is hard and fast in the door. It's just this time of year you can't. It's because I also have clients will say to me things like, "Oh, well, I just brought this in, but it's only a pledge." And it's like,
Oh,
"Well, you can't control how somebody's going to make their gift, especially if it's a
yes.
mid or major gift. Most of them aren't coming in that moment, and that's okay. I think it's good to share in case they do want to do it in the moment but if they're doing it through a DAF, like that's not going to happen.
Right. Right.
So that's not really a conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great points, Kel. Thank you for
Sure.
diving into all those topics.
Yeah.
Um, I really would love to spend some time, and you've talked really enthusiastically about your theater background too. So the next two questions here are geared more in that realm
Hmm.
with the commonalities of your work as a nonprofit leader. So, given your background as a theater director, I'd love to hear, are there elements, leadership styles, communication, bringing energy that you still draw on now in your role as a consultant working with various clients?
All day, every day, Tim. Like I can't even you can take the gal out of theater, but you can't take the theater out of the gal. I think like truly my collaborative spirit, the energy that I bring to my work with the clients, to coaching, training fundraisers, same thing with my internal team, is all very much based in my methodology as a theater director.
Uh,
So I always felt like as a theater director that it was my job in the room to create the most open and supportive environment for the individuals, because I could come in and I could have this idea of what I thought a character was going to be like, but my life experience is different than whomever else is in the room. And that was always so exciting. And frankly, sometimes I would be the youngest person in the room as the director. Sometimes I would be the only female identifying person in the room as a director. So, like, the beauty was that I could analyze a text, I could be really clear about the story that we were telling, but one of the most beautiful things was the surprise that I would get when actors were actually embodying these characters because their life experience was different than mine.
Oh, yeah.
So an analogy I used to use that I think I still really use in my work is that, as opposed to thinking that it's prescriptive of like, if I wanted to be in a solo collaboration, I would have been a writer, like writing a novel, as opposed to a director in a rehearsal room. And I think the same thing
Yeah.
with what we do. Like, I talk and I'm communicating with individuals all day long. That's my whole
Yeah.
job. So what I like to say is that as a theater director, I felt like it was my job to drop the breadcrumbs
Oh.
and then see which breadcrumbs and see what journey the actor went on. It was always better for them to make a discovery themselves. And I think that's also
Mm.
being a good leader of, it's better to have somebody be able to make a discovery themselves than tell them or show them yourself. So like,
Yeah.
how can I guide somebody on their own journey, because they're going to have ahas that are more complex, more in depth than I could have ever created if I had just told them what to do or told
Yes.
them what to think. So,
Yeah.
it just feels really in alignment what I'm doing now. And I also like to think that we all have our own superpowers. And
Mm.
so, and I will say, I just have, and this is like way before the Wicked situation, but the Wizard of Oz was my favorite film as a kid, and
Oh, okay.
I always thought I was Dorothy, and I would always be Dorothy for Halloween. And a couple of years ago, as I was shifting fully into the consulting, I decided I was now Glinda. I'm being really geeky.
Hey,
I can't believe I put that on screen. I've never done that before, by the way.
that's
Um,
wonderful.
but I keep her because I think it's like my job is to be like, you have the power all along, my dear. And so that's
Yeah.
my job, is to help other people uncover their own superpowers and see that in themselves in a larger sense.
I love that. That's really touching. Thank you.
Yeah, it
Um,
was what.
I just this is not in the script.
Yeah,
But I just
it's
want
fine.
to follow up because you're the second person this week that has said they love The Wizard of Oz to the extent that it's their
Oh,
favorite movie. The other
oh,
person is the New York Times op-ed writer Thomas Friedman,
okay, okay.
and he was writing about some geopolitical topic, but he brought in The Wizard of Oz, and he's like, "That's my favorite movie of all time."
Oh,
And so I just wonder, is it still your favorite movie, and what about it has
yeah.
captured?
I don't think it is anymore. I mean, I don't know that I actually have a favorite movie anymore. I don't
Uh-huh.
know. I just don't watch a ton of films. I think I read a lot, and I watch a lot of TV actually,
Yeah.
but TV is so good now. I think for
Yes.
me it was more like a larger allegory for being a kid, and this idea that there was some kind of like magical, colorful world that was
Oh,
beyond the world I was in.
yeah.
It is funny because it was that and The Muppets Take Manhattan were like my favorite movies. So I think
Yeah.
I do think like I was always destined to go to New York City and have this like bigger than I could imagine, more colorful, brighter life than I'd seen. So
Yes. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for
yeah,
going on that
sure.
off-topic question, Cal.
Anytime. Happy to do it.
And our last question today, you're the first person I've asked this.
Okay.
It's a quote from playwright and screenwriter Aaron Sorkin, and
Yeah,
please correct me if I've got this wrong. I think he wrote A Few Good Men,
he did.
okay, which was
Yeah.
later directed by Rob Reiner, who
Wow.
unfortunately passed
Yeah.
away this week.
Yeah.
And
That's sad.
Aaron Sorkin has done all sorts of other work on stage and TV as well, I
Mhm.
believe.
West Wing.
Oh, there
That's
you
the
go.
big.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So when I had an inkling that I wanted to ask you to be a guest and I
Yeah.
came across this quote, I thought I'm going to save that question for Kel. So here you are.
Love it.
Um, and so Aaron Sorkin has commented that, quote, strong drama is built around intention
Mm-hmm.
and obstacle, end quote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just curious, Kel, how might Aaron's quote apply to your work, particularly with your 5 minute fundraising ask or other
Sure.
elements of what you do?
Sure. So, I think intention, I think that can also mean objective, like what's your overall objective? So the idea when you're working with actors is the idea that they go into the scene and everybody wants something.
Yeah.
So how are you working to get the thing you need? And
Mm,
if I walked in and said, "Hey Tim, would you be willing to make $1,000 donation to organization ABC?" And you said yes, that'd be great. That's great. As far as drama is concerned and storytelling, like that's
yeah.
not so compelling.
Mm,
So the idea that obstacle of coming in and wanting something. So if I'm the fundraiser and I'm calling you because we're on our end of the year fundraiser, we're trying to raise $100,000 by the end of the year. We've got 25,000 to go.
yeah.
You usually give this time of year, usually give $1,000. You haven't given this year so far. I call you. My goal is to strengthen that relationship with you. And so
Yeah.
what I would say is that my goal is not just $1,000. My goal is how to, for this organization that we both really believe in, how do I inspire you and get you in alignment with us to make a
Mm.
donation? But also in a larger sense, like how do I get you becoming even a more intentional, active member of our community. Because if
Oh,
all it is just getting the gift again, it's just checking a box. So
the
I like
transaction.
to think, yeah, it's transactional. And I like to think about good stretch versus bad stretch. I really like yoga. And so I like this idea of like in yoga, if something feels different or like, oh, that's like my body's feeling like tighter in this moment, you
Mm,
don't just like push through it and like get hurt, like feel pain and maybe injury.
yeah.
Instead, what you do is you breathe into it, but also don't back totally out of it. Like you breathe into
Oh,
it with curiosity of why. So if I
interesting.
call you and I'm like, we miss you around here, Tim, you haven't gotten involved, you're like, oh, I am not happy with organization ABC. We didn't know. And so then to lead with
Yes.
curiosity, like, oh gosh, Tim, I'm so sorry. What happened? And then you tell me that for the last 3 years, we've been spelling your partner's name incorrectly in the
Mm,
acknowledgement letter, and that you're upset that we continue to make that mistake. We didn't know other than me
right.
having a phone call with you. And hey, that one's actually really easy to solve. And I
Yes.
might, in that conversation, I would still probably be audacious and get a little gutsy and ask you to increase to 1,500. But then
Yeah.
I know why you didn't give. So that to that point of, what do you say, obstacle? Was that the
Yes.
noun he used?
Intention and
Yeah.
obstacle.
So yeah, so your intention is to be heard and your intention is for us to understand that like this isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
My intention as the fundraiser is to build the strongest relationship with you possible.
Yes.
And then the obstacle is this mistake that the organization has been making. So,
Right.
yeah, so then you've got some drama. Then you've got some like compelling drama. I don't know if it's quite like worthy of the West Wing, but but it's true. You need to have an I want, and then you need to figure out how are you going to work with, around, through, surpass an
Yes.
obstacle. Yeah.
I've never heard that analogy with yoga, the good stretch and the bad stretch, but I
Yeah, yeah.
really like that.
Oh, cool. Good. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
use it all the time and I use it. It's not just about the person that we're calling and finding the good stretch, bad stretch for them, but it's
Yeah.
also about the fundraiser. So
Yeah.
it's about that fundraiser figuring out a good stretch, bad stretch. But if you're both on the call and you're both just like checking a box,
Right.
we're not actually building relationship, and the fundraiser isn't building their skills, their soft
Yeah.
relational skills. You're just like, oh, check, we know I'm gonna call you and it's gonna be you're gonna do your $1,000 that you've done for the last 3 years. It's like that's not interesting to me. Like
Right.
I want to build relationships and build stronger relationships, and that means that sometimes there's awkward, sticky moments that we're going to navigate together. But like that's what I'm interested in, as I'm like, how are we inspiring these community members to make the most intentional contribution to our org? And then they're thinking about us more too. It's not just like, oh yeah, I always do that $1,000. Here you go. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
well, could I do 1,500? Do I want to do 1,500? What do I need to know about this organization to feel comfortable with increasing that gift? And That's really like the sauce about
That's right.
relationship building in a larger
That's the
sense.
magic of it. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Kel, thank you so much. I've
Oh, my
really
pleasure.
enjoyed our time together
Me
today.
too. Me too.
The analogies you've come up with, and as you were talking just now about, yes, you need to listen and ask the donor, but how it also can benefit the fundraiser to
Yeah,
listen and not have it just be transactional. Like it's really important.
exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Kel, thank you for your time today. I'm excited to share your interview with our people in
Great.
fundraising audience.
Okay.
And I'll just briefly here um, mention where our audience can find your conversation across various
Hmm.
platforms in the new year. So you'll be able to find Kel Haney's conversation as you typically can, every conversation, about 175 recorded so far, on LinkedIn with a link to the YouTube portion. For people that like to listen to the interviews, there'll be a link to Spotify and Podbean. And thanks to my 100th guest, Luis Diaz of WISE and the
Nice.
Donor
Love him.
Participation Project. He's sponsoring my website where Kel's interview will be based, and that is peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. Kel, I wish you happy holidays and
Thanks.
need to
Same to
look forward
you.
to your content.
Thanks. Same. Thanks for
Take
having me,
care.
Tim. Bye.
Bye-bye.